I'm Mike DeGan, and I'm your moderator for our next section, which is how corporate buyers are changing the marketplace for renewable energy. And with me today on our panel, we have Ian Schoenwald with EDF Renewables. We have Monica Testa, who's here today from Lincoln Clean Energy. And on the end there, we have Justin Picard from Geronimo. So what we're going to do today in our brief time here, 45 minutes, we're going to cover basically a brief overview. We're not going to get down into the weeds as to the various different structures that corporations can use in order to take advantage of renewable energy. But to more open it up on what we can be doing from a policy standpoint and an economic development standpoint to encourage more of the robust growth that is corporate-driven renewable energy to site their projects here in Nebraska. All right, so to start with, the main issue with corporate-driven renewable energy growth is the word growth. We've seen a dramatic uptick on corporate-driven projects just over the last 5 years. In the corporate realm, because of a number of changing policies and social pressures, corporations are more and more seeking to take issues relating to their source of electricity into their own hands rather than waiting for their respective utilities to deliver on that. And as a result, we've seen globally a significant uptick of 13.4 gigawatts in that period. The share of that that's attributable to the United States is anywhere from 3.7 to about 6.5. Sometimes the numbers are a little opaque when you start talking about green energy tariffs, because that's actually a purchase by a utility. But ultimately, the committed off-taker is going to be a corporate buyer. So this slide just very graphically shows us the dramatic increase that we're seeing. This is global. The large 9.1 is the cumulative estimate that we've got 9.1 gigawatts of corporate-driven renewable energy installed. And as you can see, 2018 last year was a landmark year for corporate-driven growth. This slide shows what we're seeing in terms of numbers. So this is number of buyers per year, and the line is the cumulative number of large corporate renewable deals that we've seen, and again, reflecting this very robust upward growth tick. So what's driving this? So corporations in and amongst themselves are making the decisions on their boards driven by their customers, driven by their shareholders that want to see their corporations commit to renewable energy. And we're seeing targets anywhere to be 100% green and a 3 to 5 year target up to 10 and 15 year targets. In addition to that, there's a number of social and peer groups that are putting pressure on corporations to join these groups and increase their join the commitment to go all green. So, who's buying? This slide is just a sample of corporations that have committed to direct purchase of renewable energy over the last 5 years. It's a veritable who's who of corporate America, ranging from large Fortune 100s down to Fortune 5,000 companies. And we're seeing it locally. There's a variety of different means by which corporations can capture and articulate their desire to get 100% renewable energy or to purchase renewable energy to match growth in new projects. We've seen it on the data farms. We've seen it with large manufacturing. And again, these range from the different structures that you can do up to and including virtual PPAs and green utility tariffs. So the virtual PPA is currently the most common vehicle that we're seeing in order to accomplish these corporate goals. So, in the traditional sense, when people think of a corporation committing to purchase renewable energy, you tend to think of a corporation buying a solar renewable facility or a wind facility and directly plugging it into their facility. That rarely happens. There are complications ranging from just the logistics of it to being in the same renewable or the same grid region. That's typically not feasible. So the structure that has arisen that avoids the complications of corporations having to get into the utility business by either building their own assets or entering into traditional PPAs where the corporation actually takes physical title to the energy. There's been a development of what we call a virtual PPA. And this device is essentially a financial transaction. It's essentially a derivative where between the developer and the purchaser, there's a commitment to be financially responsible for the offtake of the facility that's going to be constructed. The actual energy is sold into whichever RTO region that the facility is constructed in, and then there's a contractual arrangement between the customer and the developer where the difference is split between the parties. So if the energy is sold into the RTO for more than what the strike price in the agreement was, that difference goes back to the customer. On the other hand, if the energy is sold for less than that strike price, then the customer has to pay the developer that difference. But what this enables is it enables the corporate customer to be able to go back to their shareholders, to go back to their constituents and say that we have committed to this power. It enables the facility to be constructed, and it avoids additional resources, say traditional fossil resources, to be constructed in order to meet that demand. There are some other options out there. A company can simply purchase the RECs without having to enter into a contractual arrangement where they're committing to actual power. We touched on green utility tariffs. This is the least risky mechanism by which a corporation can accomplish these goals because they simply act as a customer as they normally do, but this requires utilities to establish tariffs that both commit to renewable resources being provided to generate that power, and also mechanisms in order to entice corporations to be able to go that route rather than going to some of the other market-based alternatives. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin. So Justin, take it away.
So you touched on it quite a bit here, but why are companies contracting for renewables? There's no capital investment on their part. They're contracting in and locking in future electric prices for up to 10, 15, 20 years. Attaining corporate sustainability goals, those companies that are out there looking to lock in, be green, a lot of employees want to, are really watching sustainability and watching plastics and containers and inside of shops, but companies have corporate sustainability goals that folks are trying to attain. There's no need to change your current provider. So as far as you working with OPPD or companies working with OPPD or MPPD or LES, nothing needs to change in regards to a new structure or contract in place. Public relations, a lot of folks, I was working with a CFO just yesterday in a meeting, and really folks are looking at this as a huge PR play. Why do companies want to get involved with renewables? Because their customers are demanding it. And be a part of a coalition of like-minded corporations. You saw the list up on the screen of all the corporations, companies that are getting into it. It's endless, and there's more to come. Community impacts, I think the panel previously did a pretty good job of laying out many of the community impacts that large-scale renewables can offer, but it starts with jobs. It starts with tax revenue to local communities, townships, counties. New income, diversification of ag income is huge, top of mind for ranchers and farmers in the crowd today. This is a huge diversification of income. Increased local and state spending during construction and also long-term of the project. And new charitable funding for host communities. One of the things that Geronimo does that not many developers do, but developer owners do, is we set up a community fund on every project. And so you might find that your developer or your local project might set up a education fund or a community fund so that it's broader than just the local project and all the other attributes. There's a fund that goes to the local community. And also, I think that Nebraska is a great test beta, a great beta for attracting data centers, attracting new industry. What we have found is that communities and states and economic development arms of state governments are doing an amazing job of attracting businesses today, but you know what they want? They want renewable energy. And so what's bringing these folks to the state is they want a workforce of over 150,000 people. They want a water source. They want cooler climates, believe it or not. So Nebraska is kind of on the center to northern part of the country. And they need a fiber network. And you've got a great beta here with Lincoln and Omaha, and it's showing, and you're seeing a lot of press on that. We talked a lot about the VPPA, and I would like to touch on community solar as another avenue of how corporates are getting involved. I want to talk about an article that just came out yesterday. Minnesota is highly regarded, that's where our corporate office is for Geronimo. It's highly regarded for having a successful community solar program. And Minnesota just hit an all-time high of 625 megawatts of CSGs that have come online since 2015. That's a huge stat. Our company has been a part of about half of those, and we saw the signs in 14, 15, got engaged, but it was a stakeholder group like this room that starts it. It happens having the industry of regulators and farmers and landowners getting together in a room just like this, and the utilities, and coming up with a plan. And today, 625 megawatts with another 300 on the way. And these are 1 to 2 megawatt sites. So if you're driving through Minnesota, if you've done that recently, you're going to see a lot, or flying over the state, you'll see 1s and 2s. But that's another way for all of these entities to get involved. Not to mention the public entities to be involved, cities, communities, colleges, universities. It's a great way to get involved with renewable energy, and we could have a whole session on just CSGs. Sorry, I'm getting long-winded here. I would say that another PPAs and virtual power purchase agreements are fantastic, but another one that I'm talking about a lot right now is DG and contract for differences with customers. This is where a municipality would be trying to connect a large-scale project, 20 to 25 megawatts, on their system and connecting with their customers. Their customers are willing to pay a premium for this product. So not only is it just about price and cost, and I'm not going to pay more, people are willing to pay more because it's renewable. And their customers are applauding them for doing so. I'm working with a muni right now where the price, they're going to pay more for the next maybe 10, 15 years as for this product. And I'd like to point that out. A little bit about Geronimo, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleagues here. We're a leading North American developer, now owner. Biggest news for Geronimo is that we were just acquired, and that's final as of July. We're now a national grid company, have a deeper balance sheet to do a lot more of what we've been doing in the country, but also here in Nebraska. We developed the Grand Prairie Wind Farm. To date, we have 5 projects actively that we're developing, 4 solar and 1 very large wind farm in the northeast part of the state called North Fork. The problem with that project, we're just trying to find a way to build a 60-mile extension cord to get it to market. So if you have any thoughts and ideas on that, much appreciated. But we have 4 solar projects that we're happy to, that we're developing. 3 of those are in the queue today, and we're trying to find offtakes. So I know there's been some press in the news recently, and hopefully we can have a chance to showcase those projects. And then, of course, a few conceptual projects. But with that, I'll hand it over to my colleagues.
So a couple real quick slides. I'm going to try and go through everything quickly so we can get more to the questions and make this more focused on you as opposed to, what we want to focus on. But so the highlight here is just as Geronimo is, we're large, we're successful, we've done this before, and we're financially solid. Justin touched on some of this, as did Mike, but there is no one size fits all. Talked about community solar gardens, talked about VPPAs, a little bit on distributed generation. What I have found is really instructive is to make sure you evaluate what is and isn't important as buyers or potential buyers as you're going through things. If you talk to the CFO or whoever controls the purse strings in your various organizations or household, it's going to be the money is the important part. Talk to somebody who's on the sustainability committee, it's going to be, I want green, I don't care what it costs. You talk to the marketing folks, very different answer. You can keep going down the line. It's important, though, to make sure that everybody is in the room as you're discussing where should we go, how should we go there, what's important, and as my wife, who's a consultant, likes to say, go slow so you can go fast. Won't go through all this, but again, key is there are a whole bunch of different options. Ask a few questions in the very beginning so you can figure out what are my options, what are the positives and negatives for each approach. You can do on-site, you can do off-site, you can do things that are purposely publicly in the eye so that folks can drive by and say, oh, ABC Corporation's doing something green, I like them. Or some folks want to hide it, so be it. A few of the questions here. Why are we doing this? I touched on this briefly. It's really, really important to figure that out. Again, you talk to different folks within the organization with different priorities, you're going to get very different answers. Whether it's bottom up or top down, it matters. Who should be part of the decision-making process? Again, I've touched on it. You can extrapolate where some of those decision points might be. Justin mentioned working with a municipality who's willing to pay more. I wish I had, I'd say more of those. I'll say I wish I had one of those. Price matters. We look at things as, let's first make sure from a high level this project pencils out conceptually. If the answer is no, we generally just move on. Price is an absolute first starting point. Without that, we just kind of skip. From that point, whether it's we're saving $1, $1 million, or just breaking even, obviously the differences matter, but that's a starting point. Beyond that, what else are we looking at? And how do we evaluate it? Meaning, are day one dollars more important? Is NPV more important? Is simple payback, IRR, ROI, however it is that your organization evaluates projects from a financial basis, make sure that's part of the discussion, and make sure whomever you're working with, whomever you're interviewing to potentially work with, that's known, that's communicated, and make sure they're listening. And then lastly, as far as price, certainty or not. Put real simply, if you have a contract that's, let's just say, on-site behind the meter, 5 megawatts at your manufacturing facility, you're generally going to know for the next 20-ish years, I'm going to pay X. Regardless of what utility pricing does, I'm going to pay X. Great. If prices stay the same or go up and you're happy. Conversely, some folks are more interested in, hey, if things change drastically, I can make more money with a variable contract like a VPPA. Again, figure out what is and isn't important, not just in terms of price, but in terms of risk tolerance. Then the different groups that we have kind of representative of the market. Grid scale generally deals with VPPAs, off-site projects, generally 50 megawatts and larger, solar or wind. Touching on these. And again, I'll try and skip through just so we can get more to questions. And then the distributed side, you can think of as just simply not on the transmission line, not necessarily connected through a hub using merchant pricing or connected with a large entity as an off-taker. Can be on-site, can be off-site, depending on the local rules and regulations. And again, it's important to know what the local rules are so you can see exactly what your options are.
So my name is Monica Testa, and I'm here from Lincoln Clean Energy. So I've really appreciated this panel. We've talked about some of the ways that corporates are doing it and why. But I wanted to give you an example from one of our projects in Nebraska. So Lincoln Clean Energy, we're right now constructing a 230 megawatt project in Wayne County, Nebraska. That deal is signed. We've got 3 different corporates that have signed for that project through VPPAs. The reason why they're doing that is because in the places that they're located, they're not able to sign PPAs directly at the scale that they want. So as an example, one of those customers is Vail Resorts in Colorado. So they wanted a project that was local, but they didn't have an option to contract it for it directly in Colorado. It's a regulated utility. So they looked to their adjacent state, Nebraska, and were able to sign a VPPA for us. With that one contract, they were able to offset all of their carbon emissions for 2019. So that gave them the economies of scale that they're looking for. So that was a really exciting deal for them. Again, it let them offset all of their 2019 carbon emissions. So again, I was also really appreciated the success stories that Amy and Mike shared on our last panel. We've been able to, I can provide some numbers to that from our project. So that project, we are providing $2.6 million annually in taxes and landowner revenues. That project spans 20,000 acres, 150 landowners, and so there's a lot of dispersed benefits from that project. In addition, we'll pay $3 million in wages over the life of that project. So there's a lot of local economic benefits that the state of Nebraska is getting from these out-of-state corporate customers.
Thank you, Monica, and thanks to our panel. I guess before we get into the questions, I did want to address the audience. If there are any municipalities here that wish to pay a premium for energy, please remain after. I have some people that would be very interested in talking to you. We were very happy to have this panel because you're going to get it straight from the proverbial horse's mouth as to what are the issues, what are the challenges of getting corporations who, as we've seen, they're very interested in buying renewables. That part we don't have a problem. From the panel's perspective, or at least this audience perspective, and in this conference, what we would like to see is more of these projects to be sited in Nebraska. So we're happy to have this panel here so that we can pick their collective brains as to how we can make Nebraska more attractive to these corporate-driven projects moving forward. And so with that, I'll just ask the panel generally, with the benefit of your experience doing projects across the country, and there's been some talk of some of the benefits and some of the advantages that we have here in Nebraska. If maybe you could discuss or identify some issues that you've seen in doing business here that you think would be advantageous if Nebraska could alleviate those impediments. So I'll go ahead and start with you, Justin.
Thank you. One of the challenges that we're trying to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, if there were some aspects of doing business in Nebraska that you could see changed or improved upon, what would those be, if you have any examples?
Yeah, I mean, we're all trying to develop new renewable energy resources in a great state. So that drives economic activity, allows new companies to want to come to Nebraska. I think one of the biggest log jams right today, and we talked about over breakfast this morning, was the SPP, the Southwest Power Pole, projects that are currently interconnected into the SPP, which is the area that governs all interconnection for the area of Nebraska, and all the way up from the Dakotas all the way down to, call it the Texas border. Basically, it's one governing body that says who can and cannot connect to the grid. And there's 90 plus gigawatts of projects that are trying to get online right now. And I think that's if this group, again, can try to figure that one out, that would be a good takeaway from this conference. So if we,
Okay. So we're started your Christmas list.
Yeah, we're trying.
In congestion at SPP.
And there's more. These two folks have more to add to the Christmas list. But I would just say that, it adds another layer of risk when we're talking with offtake opportunities on the C&I side, the commercial and industrial side, but also utilities. Is that's great and all, and I can put a contract together, but when is it going to be able to get online? And right now with ITCs, projects, if I'm locking in safe harboring for 19, projects have to be online by 23. So 4 years to go through the SPPQ, you can kind of see the issues that are at hand today.
Okay.
So that's one of the challenges that I think the overall industry faces, one of the challenges that I face currently with our 5 projects that we're trying to complete here in the state of Nebraska.
Justin, before we go to the rest of the panel, just one follow-up before I forget. You mentioned during your presentation that up in Minnesota, I think you said the number was 650 megawatts in community solar, which is an eye-popping number when you consider we're still just hitting about 2,000 megawatts of installed renewables back here in Nebraska. How was Minnesota able to create an environment so conducive to community solar?
Yeah, I think Ian, over breakfast again, Ian said it best. I think it was a room just like this, regulators getting together and saying, hey, look, we're going to do this. And then the utilities basically having to follow suit. I think that's what happened in Minnesota. I'm not sure that's the steps that would need to happen here, but I think it starts in Lincoln. So all roads lead to Lincoln. I think it starts right here in this community. It starts at the state. It starts with the regulators, and if there's a will, there's a way. I think that's a really good, there's an article, again, that article came out, Minnesota CSG, great community solar program, where other states are just way behind. But I think if you look that article up, you'll see that Minnesota's leading the way, and maybe maybe there is a blueprint for Nebraska that maybe folks in the room are trying to figure out, but maybe we need to promote after hours later tonight or something. Well, I think the body of folks is here in the room. I think it's just having more of that discussion.
And Justin, are you volunteering to buy tonight?
Yes. We'll pick a time and we'll figure it out. John O'Connor in the back of the room, he can help lead the way.
Thank you. Monica, you mentioned some great numbers that are being generated from your project back here, and certainly we've seen similar numbers on other projects here. What's your view, what's your experience on what we can be doing better here in Nebraska that we can get more of these projects sited here?
Sure. So last week I was actually meeting with a corporate customer. They are a global company, but they have manufacturing load here in Nebraska. They want to buy renewable power for that facility, but for them, they want to have it delivered, right? They want the least risk project at the lowest cost. And I guess unlike Justin's customers, won't pay a premium for it. So their preference would be to work with their utility to develop a product for them that allows them to take advantage of where the renewable prices are in the market. So I think having more flexibility to work with their utilities and come up with a constructive solution to get what they're looking for. I do know that customer is looking to expand their manufacturing load in the U.S., and their ability to procure renewable energy for that expansion is also a really big driver for where they decide to site. Most companies aren't as big as the Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Googles of the world, and don't have necessarily the same purchasing power that those customers do to really design what they want in each of their markets. But on aggregate, there are a lot of customers out there that are looking to expand and are looking for renewables, and that's a factor in that decision.
Monica, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here, being very generic and without getting into any specific utilities. Generally speaking, what's your experience been with how Nebraska rates nationally in terms of the attractiveness of green tariffs here?
Sure. I mean, I think so. the customers that I've seen at the scale that they're looking to buy are sophisticated enough that if they can get a better deal with a VPPA, and it is a material, like it's monetary difference, that they're going to do that. So I think that's been a challenge where you have customers that are leaning towards a VPPA rather than the green tariff because it just financially doesn't work for them. I think on the flip side, I think one of the benefits of siting in Nebraska for these corporate customers is, either they want it locally and they've got load here or an adjacent state, or they've tapped out on ERCOT. They've bought a lot of VPPAs already in Texas, and they'd like to they're ready to expand that portfolio into some other markets.
So it's interesting, kind of dovetailing on both what Justin and Monica said. Looking at Minnesota as kind of a case study, frankly, both for good and bad, is pretty interesting, since Nebraska is, I'd say, ready to pop from a solar perspective. Minnesota, frankly, the Public Utilities Commission, for lack of a better term, shoved the Community Solar Garden program down Xcel's throat. They fought it tooth and nail and threw up every obstacle possible. And frankly, were defeated on most of those roadblocks they threw up, and were forced into the program. As Justin said, we're now at 625 megawatts and expanding rapidly. And Xcel saw that a year in, 2 years in, and said, well, shoot, if we can't beat them, we better join them. They have now started their own green tariff program, and I think it was, you guys might know better, I think it was Google actually, just cited a 50 megawatt project about an hour and change north of the Twin Cities because of the ability for them to do effectively what's a green tariff with Xcel, and now they're going to site a data center there. So talking about economic development and Xcel moving the way that the tides are, it's pretty interesting where Nebraska is right now with two major investor-owned utilities and then a mix of municipal electrics and cooperatives. It's kind of like a decision point right now. Looking at things nationally, most utilities are either fighting aggressively against or reading the tea leaves and saying, we better get ahead of this. I'm not getting, frankly, much of a strong heck no, or we better run ahead of this. So it's pretty interesting to me just from an objective bystander perspective on, well, how's Nebraska going to go? Because there are really some great case studies on we should absolutely do this, or at least from my perspective, I wouldn't do that, but it's certainly not my decision. So I think it's instructive to just simply look at what other states' utilities and public utilities commissions have done to see how things might play out and what is and isn't desired for the state and the communities.
Okay, we can continue going up here, but I want to pause at this time. If there are any questions, we can go ahead and have the panel field them. Yes, sir, if you can step to the microphone.
Thank you. I'm interested in the community solar agreement, and before I ask the actual question, I want to put a plug in for OPPD because they're about to install or do a power purchase agreement on 600 megawatts just in the OPPD territory. So I salute them for that. I'm interested in the community solar and the structure that you've done in Minnesota in terms of any virtual net metering, any ownership, the tax credits. How are those structures done on your community solar? Thank you.
Without leaking all of our secrets, I'll do the best I can. I would say that, first of all, it's all Xcel service territory. So Geronimo, we saw that as an advantage as we saw the PUC getting active and shoving it down the throat of Xcel. We saw that as an opportunistic opportunity to get involved early. So having the ability to site strategic locations in the Xcel service territory was one of the first steps that we took as a company. How we're structuring those deals, it basically it looks no different than a power purchase agreement, just very limited down with our, basically was with subscribers. So it enabled public libraries, like I said earlier, cities, counties, and C&I customers to get involved. But it was a really many PPAs with us as subscribers to the overall projects. Now, there's rules and regs, and I don't know, sorry, I don't know all the details of how that works, but you had to be contiguous to, I believe it was contiguous to Hennepin County?
Whichever county you're a subscriber
Yeah.
in.
To contiguous to whichever county that you were subscribing from, and that would be, as far as their rules, that would suffice. But it really was, 200 plus new customers that have signed on, not to mention the Resi side, and I'm sure Ian will help me out here too.
Yeah, Ian, anything to add to that?
I'm actually going to
Oh, I'm
jump in.
sorry.
So I covered our Minnesota portfolio in my last job, so I can speak to this. So what was really attractive about the Minnesota Community Solar Program from a developer's perspective is that you had a fixed price and some reasonable certainty on what that was going to look like for the next 15 to 20 years. Anytime that you have that as a developer, you can go in and say, like, how much can I build this for? Am I under or over? If I'm under, great, let's move forward. I can sign that deal all day long, and I love it. I think coming up with what that rate's going to be, I think that was really hand in hand with the PUC, or I guess hand against hand, whatever you want to say. So that can be a challenge in terms of structuring those sorts of programs, which is why you don't often see it quite like that in so many places. But that really factored into what allowed that to be successful. And then as well, you could, customers that would have been too small to perhaps, buy a bigger chunk were able to still get the economies of scale of a bigger project that they could have signed on their own.
I think a couple other pieces that bear monitoring that made Minnesota's program successful. The question was, I can't remember exactly what you said. What is this most like? Is it a VPPA? Is it virtual net metering? I'd say this is basically virtual net metering. Subscriber is here, and the solar installation is wherever else. In Minnesota, it had to be a contiguous county, so be it. So that's one piece. I think what's really important, and frankly, a big differentiator versus, frankly, some of the projects I've seen, community solar projects around the country, which have not really worked, is the subscription model on a kind of a pay-as-you-go. You pay only for the energy you want, as opposed to, hey, we're doing community solar, come buy a panel. Having discussions yesterday, I won't say with whom, where the discussion was about, folks said they'd be willing to pay more, $3 per kilowatt, just add it to my bill. It's only $500 and you get a panel for 20 years. So many people said yes, and then the rubber came time to meet the road, and it was, ooh, you know what? I have better things to spend my money on right now. We got 1% subscription of a massive project that we thought we were going to get. So what's really important is, for at least Minnesota, is you're paying X right now to Excel. When the developer community came in, we're able to structure things that you simply say yes as a subscriber, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, municipal, and you will pay less than X. It still shows up as a bill credit on your Excel bill. It's just simply step one, say yes. Step two, save money. It really matters. Now, Monica also touched on certainty. I'll contrast the Minnesota Community Solar Garden Program with, it's not an exact apples to apples, but Illinois' Adjustable Block Grant Program, which is more of a lottery base. And there are a bunch of factors that contributed, but there's some difficulty, which is a small word for something that's ridiculously complex and it's hit the fan in a bunch of ways. But some difficulty right now with the Illinois program, because it was, well, we're not sure who's going to win, but let's make the incentives rich enough so that we get a whole bunch of interest, which sounds great. And what ended up happening is, for the first, what's called block, the way they set up their effective community solar garden program, it was overdeveloped at about 14-1, which means only 1 out of every 14 cited projects was actually being awarded. Some folks, some developers, put in what effectively were 30 different projects and got 0. I know one guy who, working out of his home office in Maryland, he put in 3 applications and he was 2 for 3. Okay, maybe that's the way you want to do it, maybe it's not. But when you're a county that's spent all this time, effort, energy on coming up with what's our solar ordinance going to be, How is this going to benefit the local community? And all of a sudden, we didn't get any projects with the developer partners that wanted to build here, or the county next door. We anticipated 1 or 2, and uh-oh, we got 8. How are we going to handle this? Be involved, make certainty, not just so the developers know what they're getting into, but also so that the local folks can expect, plan for, and be excited for what might be coming down the pike.
I'm trying to get numbers to compare solar versus wind. I see all these windmill wings. David City's dump is going to be full one of these days. Do they have to be replaced every 5 or 6 years? What did that unit cost to start with? $3 million? Is that the number right? I don't know. And the maintenance and the land lease, will there ever be a return on investment, or is it going to be taxpayer subsidized forever? How does it compare if you spent the same money on solar?
Well, I can answer generally that none of these projects get built without there being a provable return on investment, essentially over the life of the project, because otherwise they don't get financed. Utility scale wind project these days costs north of $100 million, so that's serious money that requires serious investment. Generally speaking, the useful life of a wind farm is generally around 20 years. In the state of Nebraska, we have a decommissioning requirement that if the wind farm is going to be decommissioned and not retopped moving forward, the developer or the owner of the project has to pay for decommissioning, which is taking it down and having it removed. Anybody on the panel want to add to that?
Sure. So I can say for our Plum Creek project, we're investing over $300 million in total CapEx to build that project. If a turbine falls off, you did something wrong. We're also really incentivized. So as a developer and as well as an owner and operator, we only make money based on the amount of megawatt hours that we generate. So if that project we are very incentivized to regularly maintain that and make sure it's performing as we said it would. Not only do we get paid less if it produces less, we'll also pay penalties to our customers so that to ensure that we are really incentivized that it operates well.
One other thing to that, as far as the decommissioning goes, a lot of folks will say, well, in 20 years, how do I know you're going to be around to actually pay for it? And to that end, often, not always, but often there's a surety or some sort of collateral requirement that goes along with, in case you, developer, are not here, we know that this is still effectively paid for.
And in fact, that's a requirement of Nebraska law for projects that are built here.
I guess you also had mentioned on the taxes. So our project, we're actually paying local taxes. So for us, it's about 1.3 million in taxes per year. For us, most of those taxes are actually benefiting the Norfolk and Winsome school districts. So a lot of that is going back into schools and back into the local tax districts.
All right, well, I see we've gone a little bit over our time, so I want to thank our panel for being here today, and we'll turn you loose for lunch. Thank you very much.
Come in.